So to start off, I want to clarify that unlike everyone else on the grandma, I have not seen the second episode. My uncle doesn't work at Nintendo, and I do not have media connections. So this is only a review of episode 1 because that's all I've seen so far, and I wanted to give my thoughts on the opening episode to the series. This video will have spoilers. If you don't want spoilers for the first episode, I I don't know why you're here. That out of the way, let's talk about the episode. To clarify, when I rate pieces of media, I do a 0 to 10 rating, 0 being do literally anything else with your time. There's no point to even trying. And 10 is a strong recommendation, and 5 is middle ground. Not bad, just industry standard, but not anything that's super good. They're not reinventing the wheel. For a first episode, I would give this a 6 out of 10 with that in mind. The first episode jumps between three storylines that they introduce. The first story introduced is the Galadriel arc and partial backstory, and it's okay. Out of the three stories between Galadriel, the Harfoots, and Elrondir, Galadriel has the weakest lines as a character. The impressions I'm getting from Galadriel is that after fighting in the War of Wrath, sometime afterwards her brother was killed, and she went on a centuries-long revenge quest only to come up empty-handed. When talking with Elrond, she gives off some very obvious dialogue that gives me the impression that the writers are writing about a soldier with PTSD is what they're going for. There's a scene where Galadriel is talking with Elrond, and Elrond brings up a valid question.
Do you truly believe seeking him out will satisfy you? That one more orc upon the point of your blade will bring you peace? If you are wrong, you are wrong. Will you lead more elves to die in far-off lands?
And in this scene, he's concerned that Galadriel will not find closure doing what she is doing. He straight up asks, how many people will you allow to die just so that you can maybe get some closure? And she doesn't know. She straight up doesn't know and is tormented by what's happened in her life and has been consumed by rage and war. She literally admits that she's seen nothing in herself besides a warrior, and that it's an interesting archetype that they're going with. I'm not too sure how I feel about this, but since this is the first episode, I'm going to wait before I allow myself to have any definitive thoughts or feelings on the matter. Now, a scene I am going to criticize is the scene between Galadriel and Elrond that comes up a bit earlier, but from the same setting. Galadriel and Elrond are having a disagreement, and this is the exchange.
But you have not seen what I've seen.
I have seen my share.
You have not seen what I have seen.
Now, the reason I take issue with this is because the show doesn't set up or establish what Elrond has seen or done in his lifetime. From the Silmarillion, we know what he did, but Amazon is changing the story beats and things that happened, so I'm not leaning on the Silmarillion as implied context or background information. I am solely relying on the context provided from the TV series. With that in mind, we vaguely saw what Galadriel lived through during the war and what she's done afterwards, but nothing of Elrond. So when Galadriel says, "You have not seen what I have seen," and Elrond responds with, "I have seen enough," this implies that he has some connection, either by direct or indirect participation with what's happened in the past. But to what extent the show, at this point, has not set up at all. So for all we know, Elrond could have fought in the war, or just heard about it from history lessons. The show never states this at all, which means that Elrond claims he knows enough and understands enough to sympathize with his friend, which gives me the impression that he has more connection to the past than simply the stories. But because of how vague the story is with this, along with the writing, Galadriel simply repeating, "You have not seen what I have seen," once again after already saying it, comes off as dismissive of what Elrond has experienced. If Galadriel could have made a direct comment or given a specific example of what happened to her that she knows didn't happen to Elrond, yes, that would have been petty to a similar degree, but it would establish a point of reference between the two that gives us, the viewer, more context. Or at least a better comparison between the two, at the very least. Because as a scene with very little context at best, and said context only being on Galadriel's side, the scene doesn't feel like it has any weight or payoff and makes Galadriel look pretentious at best, or dismissive to whatever Elrond has suffered in the past. So with that scene, we had the worst dialogue for Galadriel in the first episode, and a lot of other scenes that I've seen other people criticizing, like the wine line, a lot of these scenes and a lot of these lines don't have any payoff. The problem is we're at the very end of Galadriel's centuries-long revenge quest. So when everybody's saying, "Oh, congratulate yourself. Oh, these are lines that are supposed to be for the end of a journey." We're not getting a lot of context for the end of said journey. And so the problem is these are lines that need to be built up to have any impression over. I mean, sure, the lines aren't the best, but it's the fact that we have no context to what Galadriel's gone through except climbing a mountain, being a part of a war, and killing an ice troll or a snow troll, whatever it was called. When the rest of her elves couldn't even lay a finger on it, she was able to kill it. So it feels like all the celebrating just feels cheap. There's no build up to it, and I don't really know how to fix. Off the top of my head, I don't know how to fix it. But anyways, moving on to the Harfoots. To be honest, Huh? Oh, right, the Harfoots. To be honest, I was bored. They claim to live free, without responsibility and without consequence. Also, they don't want people to see them. Also, did I mention that they have what looks like a prophecy book for the stars? Moving on to Arondir. So far, this is the best story that I'm most invested in for the series, but it's also the one with the best world building, so I guess there's my bias. The dialogue on this show isn't fantastic, but with Arondir's scenes, the implied context, the body language, and natural feel to the story is easily the best of the first episode. So to start off, we find Arondir and his buddy walking to a human town, looking a little edgy with their hoods up. The townsfolk call Arondir Soldier, and one kid gets mad claiming that the real king of the humans arrives. Once he does, they'll live as they want and not where the elves told them to go? This is kind of explained, but not really. Anyways, as the scene continues, we see more and more that there's some hatred between the humans and the elves. I will mention that Arondir is a darker skinned elf in love with a white, single human mother, and Arondir's buddy states the obvious that human and elf relations don't end well at this time. So, for those who missed it, this is a very literal metaphor for why we should accept interracial couples. But I did want to point out the literal metaphor is very painstakingly literal. Now, first Arondir, when entering the tavern, hears about some animals getting poisoned as he walks into the tavern area, and it's happening to the east, but they're not sure where. Later, he leaves to talk to Bronwyn, the white woman he's in love with, gets some seeds from some flowers that he loves, because apparently he was a grower. I assume that's like gardener. And later he just leaves and returns from patrol with his buddy. His regiment, by order of the king and all the watch elves, are being recalled to leave. So for about 79 years minimum, the elves have been watching over the humans, as some humans sided with Morgoth in the war, and the elves seem to associate all humans as followers, or potential followers of Morgoth in general. So elves distrust humans, humans feel like they've been controlled like cattle by the elves. Later on, Arondir goes to visit Bronwyn to let her know about his departure and his feelings towards her. But during that scene, a farmer comes to visit the healer, who is Bronwyn, and hearing that the cow went out east to where something else was poisoned earlier, Arondir and Bronwyn set out to the village to see what's going on, and the last scene we get from their story is a village on fire. So as far as the first episode goes, I'm disinterested in Galadriel, but I liked Elrond a lot more. The Harfoots felt like a snooze fest, and I really could not care less about them, even with a meteor falling from the sky at the very end of the episode. And Arondir and Bronwyn's story was easily the best in my opinion as an opening act to this series. Overall, the show has its potential to either have a very interesting, well set up story with Arondir, or it can become a boring and uninteresting series with the Harfoots. Galadriel, the character, has both strong and super weak lines, so I can't say I'm all that excited to follow her story. However, at this point, the first episode will get a 6 out of 10 from me. The weak and uninteresting story of the Harfoots and some of the blunders on the dialogue with Galadriel weaken the episode. However, I will continue watching the show purely based on Arondir's story, because I actually am interested to see where it goes. But getting me interested in 1 out of 3 stories your first episode sets up is not what I would call successful writing, though. However, I'm a degenerate, No one asked, and I hope you all have a good day.